So I keep this large document on my desk to remind me of the responsibility we have to respondents. It's 120 pages long. It takes about an hour and a half to read. Many of you have probably written something similar, but my guess is very few of you have actually read one. Changes to this document are made once or twice a year. The data collected gets looked at once a year, and no actual business decision is made using this data. This document is a quarterly brand tracker run by a major beverage manufacturer. It costs them tons of money, and they absolutely hate it. If there's one message that you take away from this talk, it's that surveys like this are a waste of time, money, and resources. And in the new mobile world, you won't be able to field a study like this because no one is going to be willing to take it. On the other side of the spectrum is this. Google and a few other companies have popularized what is now known as the microsurvey. It's fast and cost-effective, simple to read, and easy to understand. And it comes with tons of limitations. Limitations on question length and format, answer length, expected response times, and most apparently the number of questions, 1 or 2 at a time. I'm going to argue in the next 20 minutes that these limitations are actually good for the future of survey research. Until a few weeks ago, these microsurveys were limited to a web-based experience. You could visit a website and answer a single survey to access an article on a site. And the nice part about it is you could run lots of these surveys very cost-effectively and get a representative sample of the internet population, something that you really couldn't do very well before, or at least in a cost-effective and timely way. So the thought was, how can you take this large 120-page document and split it up into a set of 1 or 2 question surveys? Now, admittedly, that's going to sort of one extreme, and I think we went a little too far. While most use cases are possible with 1 or 2 question microsurveys, if researchers just had a few more questions, maybe 5 or 10, many more things could be done. And there's a lot of great reasons why you'd want to break up those microsurveys into 5 to 10 question, these big surveys into 5 or 10 question microsurveys. And we've thought a lot about that over the last year as we've launched and iterated on the product that we've built. The data shows that long surveys are not good for researchers, they're not good for clients, and they're not good for respondents. Longer questionnaires result in lower response rates. So you have to solicit more people to actually get the data that you want. Longer questionnaires also lead to lower response quality, and they increase straight-liners, people who are sort of what we call spammers, but are fraudulent, kind of clicking through to get their incentive or their reward. And the types of questions that you would run in a long survey like this, the big matrices or grid questions with 30 brands and 10 attributes each, having to go through and check the right boxes, those lead or introduce measurement error and are more difficult for respondents. Excuse me. So the question is, how can you take the 120-page survey and break it up? Maybe not into individual questions, but sets of 10. And what we found are there are 3 main ways to do this, or 3 things that at least you have to think about while you're doing this. First, you have to start with a hypothesis. Usually a brand tracker like this is used as a data mine. Only after we find some correlation between brands or behavior do we look a little closer at the data. When you're modularizing a survey, you have to make a reasonable guess at the correlation that you think will happen and have an idea of why that might be the case, so you can spend an entire 10-question survey to understand and figure out what you want to know. So if you want to understand the market for soda and you think there's a correlation between people who don't like soda and healthy eaters or other healthier brands, you can measure that directly instead of asking users to fill out a 30 by 10 grid of beverages they purchased and how positive they feel about those brands. The second thing that we have found that is useful when sort of breaking up these surveys is, instead of asking a lot of questions about a user, you can infer characteristics of a respondent by using metadata about the user or the survey. For us, we have a lot of data about users and can use it to understand what their gender is, their age, their income, whether or not they have children, what things they're interested in, so that we don't have to actually ask those questions in a survey. And the third thing is that you have to be able to measure more often. So instead of running a brand tracker once every 6 months to understand consumption behavior, you can run a lightweight 1 to 5 question survey every day asking, what are you drinking now? Or what have you purchased lately? Beyond reducing measurement and non-response error, microsurveys are perfect because they fit into a mobile device. And so you don't have to design a survey for the web and design a survey for mobile. You design your survey once and you let the provider choose where to actually place that survey in front of a respondent. For mobile users, they have a shorter attention span. They tend to spend less time sitting at their computer, and mobile devices have smaller screens and inputs that are made for touching and swiping. So you have to think of how you would create a survey to actually meet those needs. And they're different from desktop computer users, and the traditional surveys that you would create for those users don't fit very well into mobile. So again, by putting the limits and restrictions up front on the researcher, you actually end up with a survey that can be placed either in mobile, in a mobile sort of platform, or on the web. So then you might think, well, why do we even care about mobile in the first place? And I'd argue that you have to care about mobile because soon phones and tablets will be the only way that people are accessing the internet. And just to prove it to you, I want to show you a few stats that I've gathered from various presentations and data that we have here at Google. Let's take a look at internet traffic first. This is a graph of mobile and internet as a total percent of internet traffic. You can see in 2014 about 30% of, by 2014, 30% of internet traffic will be from phones and tablets, and by 2015, more traffic will come from mobile devices than from desktops. And I'm sure you already see this in your own use. You know, while you're at home watching television, you're on your tablet or on your phone checking out your mail or a website instead of sitting in your office on a PC. In developing countries, this has been happening for a long time. This is a graph of Chinese internet users accessing the web via desktop or mobile phones. And already in June of 2012, that line had more people, or a larger percentage of people are accessing via phone than they are on desktop PCs. And the same holds true for India and Brazil and many of the emerging African countries. And some have skipped desktop altogether and wired internet and started with mobile phones and tablets and wireless internet. Even in the most connected countries, South Korea being the most connected country in the world, searches from mobile devices have already surpassed desktop. And we see the same trend for other connected countries like the US and much of Western Europe. If you take a look at where the money is being spent, the story holds true. So desktop spend for advertising is plateauing in the next few years over 2014 and 15. And you can see the enormous increase in mobile advertising over the next few years. Even if you look at shipments of devices, the trend is just completely obvious. In 2007, when the iPhone was introduced, you can see that smartphones started to pick up, and since 2010, they've grown at a tremendous pace, faster than anything that we've ever seen at Google, and we are struggling to keep up with it. A lot of our projects sort of get started now in what we call a mobile-first initiative, meaning we concentrate on the mobile experience before even thinking about the desktop experience. And that's because more people are using mobile phones to access the internet. There we go. Tablets are also outshipping desktops and notebooks. As you've seen in the previous slide, this sort of makes it more clear. We've already passed the point at which tablets are, or tablet shipments are greater than both desktop and notebooks. And that will continue going forward. So what we're seeing here is a shift that mobile brings, is the shift in usage patterns that we can take advantage of in research. No longer are respondents confined to their shared computer at home when talking or when taking a survey. You can reach individuals anywhere and do all kinds of engaging tasks. And the nice thing about mobile devices is that they come with all sorts of sensors that we can take advantage of as well. So if you wanted to target customer satisfaction surveys at users who just stepped out of a store, sure, you can do that with a mobile device. If you want 10,000 people to take a picture of their kitchen pantry so that you can understand what foods are bought and how they're used and organized, no problem. Mobile device makes that very easy. If you want to ask users who are sitting in the passenger seat of a car what they're listening to on the radio, simple to do on a mobile device. These are all the types of sensors that allow us to do really interesting targeting and make mobile surveys in particular better for respondents. So I think what you've seen here is an emerging trend and an undeniable trend that mobile is not just the next big thing, it's really the only way that people will connect to the internet in a few short years. So my message to you, if you're a supplier and you don't have a strategy to move all your survey data collection to mobile, you're in trouble. If you're a client and you think you can continue to get away with these large and all-encompassing surveys with the same level of data quality and response rates, you're in trouble as well. And so I think I just want to encourage everyone to think about how their business is going to change because of the changing landscape in the world as it exists today. One of the interesting things about Google is that we're sort of uniquely positioned to see this happen. Already there are about 1.75 billion mobile smartphones out there today, and of those are Android devices. So some 66% or so of all devices are Android devices, and it's a huge opportunity for Google. And there are parts of the Android operating system that we control and can take advantage of. One of the possibilities here is that we could have an app or a mechanism on every single Android phone so that we could collect data from anyone all over the world at any point in time. And that makes it really interesting for us and kind of how we see the future of this, not just data collection for survey and research purposes, but also to make our products better over time. I think a question that gets asked a lot when you talk about Android is that, you know, Android users are different than iOS users or iPhone users or BlackBerry users. And, you know, we wanted to understand what the differences were. And we did find some differences, but what we did is we took over 150 measures of sort of questions about how people, sort of the psychographic and demographic profile of users, how they engage with civic and political activities, how they use technology, their political ideology, their media consumption and shopping behavior, and took just the differences between iPhone users and Android users, self-reported iPhone and Android users, and just tried to understand what the differences were. And on average, there were very few differences. This is the column on the right is the average difference for each one of these categories in percentage points. And we ran chi-square tests to make sure or figure out which ones were significant. And in the end, only the two at the bottom were, so media consumption and shopping behavior. And around media consumption, it's about streaming music and video and how iPhone makes that easier than Android does today. And shopping behavior is around purchasing things on your phone, how much money that you spend on average. And what we found here is that iPhone users are more affluent in general than Android users, and that accounts for most of the differences in all of these categories, affluence, from what we've seen thus far. Now, when you compare smartphone users to Gen Pop, so the general population, it's much different. And so there is a difference between a smartphone user and a person who does not have a smartphone, especially when you compare it to Android and iPhone differences. And so the concept here is that you have an opportunity to take, again, because of the way that we've designed our system, and I'm sure other companies can do the same as well, by serving the survey in different modes, whether that be desktop or mobile smartphone app, or even through calling, these sort of dual frame methodologies, you can actually end up with a better representation of the population that you're trying to go after, and sort of not have all of the biases that come with just smartphone users. So again, what we've learned in this sort of Android versus iPhone study that we've done, and we're going to release a white paper in the next few weeks describing exactly what we've seen, is that smartphone users are different than the general population, but what we see is that smartphone penetration is increasing at such a rapid rate that most people will have a smartphone in the next, again, 3 to 5 years. That Android users and iPhone users actually really aren't that much different. And then if you look at it, Android users are actually closer to the general population in terms of these categories that I described. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk briefly about a product that we just launched, Google Opinion Rewards. This is a way for us to push surveys to users and give them credit, Google Play credit, for answering those surveys. Again, you use the same tools, Google Consumer Surveys, to create the surveys, but we decide where to actually serve the survey up, whether that's on a website or through the mobile device. So you should check that out if you have a minute. To wrap this up, the world is changing, the outside world is changing, and it's moving to mobile. And you have to have a plan because surveys have to change in response to the world. Not just surveys, but other research data collection as well. And you can start now by figuring out ways to take those big surveys and modularize them and make them better for users. That's all. Thank you very much.